You like my Easter shirt?
I love it.
Bucky's, man.
I love it. It's beautiful.
It's beautiful. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Unconventional Therapist Guide to Nothing. My name is Dave. I'm joined here with Greg. You may not recognize him if you're watching this, but that's Greg, I promise you.
I'm exposing myself to ridicule
I'm glad you
and
added that ridicule part in because I was like, oh boy.
yeah. Oh, good.
If you're
Yeah.
not on video, you might have some
We're
questions.
changing. We're shifting gears with this podcast. You're not getting enough views, so we're exposing
We're not
ourselves.
getting enough views. Way to like make us sound bad. All right, here we go.
All right.
Well, yeah. So, Greg, tell us what we're doing today. It's
Uh,
Easter so we're recording on Easter. I know
yeah.
last week was our Easter episode, but we're actually recording today on Easter, and we're recording a little late, so I think we're gonna probably get this bad boy rolling a little bit.
We're gonna get this bad boy rolling, and I think that I had a lot of fun with this one today on Easter.
Ooh,
I did. I think like there's some very interesting points here when it comes to I found myself being surprised with mass hysteria or social contagion, however you want to frame it. Whether or not those are different, we're going to try to figure that out. I had more fun with this than I thought I would, just like I kind of had more fun with Stockholm than I thought I would. I remember I was kind of like, oh, okay, these are both fun.
sure.
So if you have any familiarity, wow.
Familiarity.
Familiarity. That word is running through my brain and I can't even say it. If you're familiar with the Salem witch trials, which you better be, because we took a long time to cover that one, you already know something about this mass hysteria, also now known as psychogenic illness.
Ooh,
Because, Dave, we re like to rename things, and this has happened to us a lot, that have these antiquated, slightly offensive undertones. Although this time I will give it up because hysteria was a tough one. Um,
okay.
yeah. So I'll talk a little bit. I actually want to talk a little bit about that word hysteria. The word hysteria comes from the idea brought up by Hippocrates, who, he hit the mark a lot of times, but he missed it this time. He thought women had a wandering uterus, and if it wandered too far, things didn't work out. And even later on, it's almost like it was a diagnosis forever, right? And it applied to a wide variety of mental health illness and even physical symptoms experienced by women alone.
Mhm.
So it was a broad diagnosis. And women could be hospitalized for this with no actual health concerns at all. And we could probably talk about that if we hadn't already. With the Nellie Bly, we probably talked about it, where
Yeah.
people were being hospitalized for no reason because they were being hysterical, which meant they had a wandering uterus, which is wild. Dave, this diagnosis of hysteria is gone. It's off the books.
Right.
But do you want to th throw a guess out there when it finally left the books?
The
Like literally the
DSM
DSM.
5.
It left in 1980.
Oh, so what was that like
It was three.
it was 3?
But I mean, is that wild or
Yeah.
what?
So in the 70s, 60s, we're still using the term hysteria.
Yeah.
That actually, doesn't really surprise me too much, I guess.
I think that's 1980s when homosexuality left the DSM too,
Mm,
which is, I mean, gained some ground in the 80s, that's for
right,
sure, right?
right.
Now, mass psychogenic illness refers to an outbreak of unusual, uncharacteristic, behaviors, thoughts, feelings, symptoms, but it's got to be shared among a group of people. So beyond the events in Salem, which is probably one of the best, markers if you want to get an understanding of it, there's tons of historical examples, and we're gonna see that a little bit down the road. But like I was saying with like hysteria, there's a little bit of an origin story to this mass hysteria idea, and it's an interesting one for our purposes because it brings up some names and some ideas that we've seen in past episodes. And I love this little, I don't know, anecdote. So the symptoms are interesting. They have to match culture. And around like the late 1800s, early 1900s, getting into the 1920s, 1930s, the stuff that we'll talk about before, like this hysteria, like this really bizarre behavior, like dancing and laughing
Yeah.
and hiccups, or like, it's kind of going away. Like it's the spiritual sense of it is the demonic possession side of it. That kind of stuff is taking a back seat. So there's this doctor, and his name is Charcot, and he's a French, you know, psychiatrist, but there's not such a thing quite yet. But he's noticing hysteria, and he's like, you know what? I'm not so sure about this wandering womb disease. He's like, I'm positive it's just women, of course, but I think that it's maybe something a little more medical. And so he gets these group of women and he puts them on a stage in a theater and he would display them. And that we talked about this at one point. And there's this one bystander who's like, that doesn't seem so much medical. It seems more mental. And that person is Freud. And this moment is the birth of conversion disorder and the
Oh,
subconscious, really,
yeah.
really. So, and you know what's interesting is like conversion disorder and mass psychogenic illness are very similar because it's like there's something that's not there. Like it's in your head, but it's not in your head because it's like real, but it's also definitely in your head. It's coming from your head.
Right. So the biggest difference, would you say, would be that one being conversion disorder
Yeah,
affects an individual. The
beautiful.
second one affects maybe a larger group of individuals.
Which is which is wild if you just follow that train of thought that we're talking about. So this is something that's in your head and it's affecting you physically to the point where I was curious if there could be actual physical symptoms besides just like psychological, like things that could be kind of affected by your nervous system,
Mhm.
like blindness or paralysis or laughing, whatever it is. But you could develop rashes, which I found very interesting. Anyways, back to your point. Yes, this is the kind of thing where it's like you have this thing in your head that you're not faking that's causing physical symptoms, which is contagious,
Yeah.
which means that it can go from your head to someone else's head. It's like a line of sight almost illness, right? Like you have to see it to be affected by it. And what's super scary about that in the day and age we live now is social media,
Mhm.
the internet, and everything like that. So our vision of things that we could possibly see and be affected by is, tenfold what it used to
Right.
be. And just real quick back to Freud and the gender thing is, although this is always assumed to be a female sort of disorder for years and years and years, think about World War One. I was thinking about that. Shell shock, rampant, right?
Mm.
There was even this one case of this one guy who, this is a trauma that's like right on the nose. He could not use his trigger finger anymore. It went completely paralyzed his entire life after serving in World War One. I mean, if that's not
Yeah.
so, and I guess like that specific case would have been conversion disorder, but it's interesting that shell shock was kind of widespread, you know?
Yeah. So the biggest thing, are you saying, like, is all right? So for shell shock, like there's an explanation to the trauma
Mhm.
usually, right? Is that the case in mass hysteria, or is there sometimes not always like an event that people are witnessing or being a part of that can impact the behavior?
So it's pretty common to affect people within a specific group. And like I said, it is kind of something where there has to be some kind of weird explanation or thought that something is affecting them or fear or anxiety. So
Yeah.
what is it? All right, I can get into that a little bit. So, people commonly obviously refer to this as mass hysteria, so we can kind of continue to do that without offending too many people. Everyone knows that that's an antiquated term, but we know what we're talking about when we say that, right? And this rapid spread of panic and fear, but they consider mass hysteria to be a type of conversion disorder, sort of, like you're saying, but it does have to have some kind of sociological effect. Like there's this collective behavior, or someone has to influence somebody else. It's interesting that it's like this psychosocial thing. So it's like something has to be seen and something has to be believed
Yeah.
for it to happen. And it's almost like there's been cases where, say like it's happened in a plane, for instance, and they thought like there was this something spreading around the plane, and was causing all these people to be really sick and vomit and have diarrhea like all over themselves. Just a wild ride. And as soon as they kind of got the people off the plane and tested and said like, no, there's nothing here, everyone was healthy again in about 2 hours.
You think that when they arrived to the airport and they're walking into the terminal to the baggage claim, one of them looked at each other and goes, Damn, that was a wild ride.
Wild ride. I know, it's just like throw up all over down their shirt.
Covered it through all soiled.
Yeah, yeah.
Man,
It's
that
like,
was
what was it?
wild.
Oh, so it was nothing? It's weird, right? And it's interesting because there's two.
Spirit Airlines sucks.
I know, I know. I wonder what it was. But you know how easily you could. So I'm like, oh man, what a bunch of dopes. But at the same time, I remember being in like sixth grade and they were handing out papers about meningitis and immediately feeling every single symptom on the paper. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's like
Right.
it's like one of those things where it's like, yeah, we do that. I don't know if it's a protective thing or what, but we definitely do it.
It's you know what another example of that would be? Do you know people who are super afraid of getting side effects to medications? And it's
Yes.
almost inevitable that they're gonna start to get that side effect because it's like they almost are willing it to happen because they're so afraid of it. Like,
Yes. And have you heard of the nocebo effect?
yes, one didn't we talk about that on here
We
before?
did.
Long
And
time ago. Yeah.
what was that exactly?
That's the idea. It's like the opposite of a placebo, where
Placebo. Right.
something you purposely don't let something work for you or something. Was that what it was? Or
Yeah, we'll have to look at we'll look into
I
that.
can't.
Maybe
Yeah,
there's
now
science,
it's like
but
kind of dawn.
that's gonna drive me
It's
crazy because it probably applies really well to this.
placebo is when you're taking something that's not actually it, but you're so convinced it is that you feel the benefits from it, right?
Yes.
And nocebo. Oh boy, you. I hope you're looking it up.
I am. So the nocebo effect is a situation in which a patient develops side effects or symptoms that can occur with a drug or therapy just because the patient believes they
Oh
may
yeah.
occur.
Okay. So what I
Yeah.
basically just kind of described is
Okay.
a
Yeah.
nocebo effect.
Almost
Yeah.
what I thought placebo effect was anyway. But
Yeah.
it's like they're very confusing. They're very close.
Yeah.
Anyways, there's two types of mass hysteria here, and one is the mass anxiety hysteria, and this tends to show up among people that belong to the same close often isolated group, which we'll talk about, maybe like nuns, things like that.
Hmm.
It involves sudden tension and other symptoms of anxiety, which spread but resolve fairly quickly. I don't know if you like saw this thing in like Leroy where there was these the girls with the ticks and everything like that. Once you kind of and the plan I just described, once you kind of understand that, oh, this is nothing, the symptoms resolve kind of within no time.
Yeah.
But then there's mass motor hysteria, and this type tends to show up among people experiencing long-term stress and tension. And this is when you're going to see the irregular motor movements and the symptoms that gradually go from person to person and linger for weeks and weeks and weeks, like Salem. And I don't know, almost like complex PTSD. And it's
Oh.
just
Okay.
very strange. You're stuck in that, right? Like Salem, they were stuck in that, and it was constant. And the mass hysteria was just you believed everything because why wouldn't you? 100% of people believed in like the unknown and the paranormal
Yeah.
and God and the devil and it was all there. Magic, it was just all there.
So
This is almost like it's almost like contagious magic,
yeah.
a magical virus.
Right. I'm getting a few horror movies popping into my head
Okay.
that I feel
Okay.
kind of fit mass motor hysteria.
All
Um,
right.
Final Destination movies. So they escape death, but
Mhm.
they're convinced death is following them. So inevitably it catches up to them. And they like, could it be that, it's kind of they're creating it, subconsciously through their actions?
Oh my gosh.
It's
Yeah,
like
that is such an I would have never in a million years went Final Destination with that. But it's like they're seeing evidence of it because they really believe it's true.
they believe it. Yep.
And
Yep.
so this is what this is.
There's a whole path. And then the other one, what about like The Ring? There's a whole lore about the tape. If you view it within 7 days, you're gonna die. Even like Smile, that movie Smile, which I know you
Yeah,
ended up watching, and I was
love it.
kind of encouraging you to because it was like definitely some like a great metaphor for PTSD and how you can almost like pass your PTSD by your
Yeah.
how it affects you. But that's kind of what we're talking about here, that mass motor hysteria. It's like passed on almost.
And so what if someone like is like say someone in Salem believed that this mass hysteria was real and witches were real and they were in Salem and they died in a cell or something. It was true for them. I was just thinking about that. So like that's such a strange thing about truth where it's like if that person died believing that, it was true for them
They,
always.
and they ended their life believing it to be true.
And it so it was.
Oh, oh my God, there's so many layers to this.
Yeah.
Because as you were describing that, then I'm
I'm
like,
getting hot. I gotta take off my shirt.
think about cults. in
Wait, oh
when
yeah.
in mass suicides of cults, they
Yeah.
die believing that to be true. So to them, that is the truth,
So is it tragic? It's tragic for the people left behind,
right?
but
For
is
the
it tragic
people
for the
left
member?
behind, it is. I mean, I don't know what happens in the afterlife, so I can't really say that there's no realization of a different truth or that they're even wrong in the first place. Because who am I to say that? But yeah, there's so many layers to this
Oh
conversation
yeah.
and
No, and you
examples, I
not
guess.
knowing
Yeah.
what happens in the afterlife, we're gonna take some heat for that from Mary Jane or whoever commented on the ACT episode. But I digress. I digress from that. Yeah.
I mean, I have my beliefs of what happens, so I can't speak for
I
everybody.
can't be sure, you know?
Um,
So those are the two types, Dave. I mean, it'd be cool if like you and I maybe give a couple of examples because I think that's fun. That's the
sure.
fun.
Do you want to take the first one?
Well, no,
Or
so
did you add some more? Yes, you did. Okay. Let
yes,
me.
I
So
did.
I stumbled on a couple of examples and I just jotted them down for us to talk about. And this first one, actually, so this episode itself was a listener recommendation. I think it was from our buddy Tyler, who's been a longtime listener and
Yeah.
has commented numerous times with just suggestions and feedback and everything. So shout out to Tyler. But he actually wanted to talk about us to talk about, I think he label it social contagion, which I'm going to get to later. But you had already recommended mass hysteria. And the example I found, which is what he was referring to, was under mass hysteria. So, long story short. Um, so, the earliest case, studied case with the epidemic hysteria are the dancing manias of the Middle Ages, which included St. John's dance and I never heard of this, Tarantism. Had you
Mm,
heard of that? No.
I haven't.
These were supposed to be associated with the spirit possession or the bite of the tarantula. Uh,
Ah,
so interesting, right? And kind of creepy.
yeah.
Those with dancing mania would dance in large groups, sometimes for a week at a time. And the dancing was sometimes accompanied with stripping,
Mhm.
howling, and making obscene gestures. I wonder what those were. Or reportedly laughing or crying to the point of death. And
So
this dancing mania was widespread over Europe.
it's funny because they start to come out of these types of hysteria, like I talked about with the Freud piece, after, I guess it almost seems like after the Victorian era, which makes sense because you're leaving the super religious era of the Middle Ages, and then you're going through the 1800s. And once you get into the 20s, and you start like the repression starts to loosen its hold.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a part of it too, right? That you didn't see as much of it because people aren't as repressed and dancing mania, stripping, acting completely wild. That like what happened in Salem. That is widespread conversion disorder slash mass psychogenic illness. That's what that is. It's like we've been holding this in for so long, it's happening. We just can't stop it.
I
Yep.
wonder if they actually did get bit by a tarantula or if they just thought they had or had concerns that they had to the point where they basically like psyched themselves out into thinking they had this dancing
Well, you
mania.
look at a tarantula and you're like, that dude, that thing's got to be able to do something to you.
Oh, there must have been tarantulas everywhere for them to even like be concerned about
Consider that.
this.
Yeah.
Yikes. Oh my God. Imagine
Talk about the
that.
dark ages. You know what I mean?
Uh,
Tarantulas hanging out and everyone has BO,
no, thank you.
magic everywhere. Yeah, it's tough.
Magic. Well, that sounds enchanting, but the rest of it
Yeah.
sucks. You throw in something like magic everywhere. I was like, dude,
Magic, you know, tarantulas. I
if you
don't
said
know.
Magic the Gathering everywhere, I've been like, oh,
Oh no, that's our demographic. Don't hit that.
just kidding, everyone.
Yeah, yeah.
All
We're
right.
into it. I'm playing it later tonight.
Totally. I love Magic the Gathering. All right. So the next example is between the 15th and the 19th centuries, there was instances of motor hysteria common in nunneries. So young women that made up these convents were sometimes forced there by family. So there was like strict discipline, like very routine and rigid, you know, regimen that they had to follow and stuff like that. Once accepted, they took the vows of chastity and poverty. So, I mean, kind of like a tough life, I guess. And then the nuns would exhibit a variety of behaviors, usually attributed to demonic possession. They
Hmm.
would sometimes use crude language, exhibit suggestive behaviors. And one of the convents with the nuns would regularly meow like cats.
Yeah.
And then they
Meow, meow,
would,
meow, meow, mew. Like Mr.
jeez,
Rogers.
yeah.
That's all I could think of. And yeah, I came across that too. And like, whoa. like, can you imagine? So you mean they were acting crude and a little bit suggestive after being repressed for years and years
Right,
and years?
right. Yeah,
It's like,
exactly.
come on, like that stuff's got to come out somewhere. It's like leaking out
But
of, oh,
I mean, the crazy thing is, and I do hope that we end up doing this episode, but they were actually calling priests in to do like to exorcise the demons.
yeah. You know
And
what? There was actually, someone was executed, of course, like a woman was executed for, quote unquote, being a witch because of one of these weird nunnery things.
yeah,
I mean, one minimum, obviously, probably more than that.
sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah, the whole idea of that is just kind of boggles your mind to think that that actually existed at one period of time. But imagine they're doing these exorcisms for women that are probably like, what are you doing?
No, and I even often thought when I was young, even, not super young, but, the Catholic priests, when you start to see the obvious issues that they were having, that is that part of the repression too? Like, is it just a bad idea to repress a group of people? I mean, because something's gonna, it's almost like they get into that because society or religion has like,
Ooh,
sort
dude,
of created something where they're like, no, you can't be this.
remember that demographic when we get into the social contagion piece, because I
Yeah.
think you just might have also identified a potential social contagion.
Might be. I might have. So to get on with these, to follow on with these, there's this super interesting one that I won't get too in the weeds with because I think it could be its own episode. Have you ever heard of the Hammersmith ghost hysteria
No,
of 1803? I love how
um,
they say things like that,
of
you know what I mean?
1803. Yeah,
Yeah.
not to
And
be confused with the 1806 one.
so like there was this stigma, and it had to do with the stigma surrounding buried suicides on suicide, people who passed away or completed suicide passed away on sacred ground, like in a churchyard or whatever. And so there was like this weird sort of ghost conspiracy about that. But it ended in a strange way where someone suspected of being a ghost was shot and killed, and then, you know, became a ghost. I'm
Because you
just kidding.
shot me.
Yeah. Like, no, I'm not a ghost. And it's like, oh, well, like, it's almost like the witch,
There's only
when they're
one way to
checking to see if
tell.
you're a
This
witch.
bullet
Yeah.
will prove it.
There's only one way to find out, buddy. If you bleed and say ow, yeah, all right. That's on me. So have you ever heard of Spring-Heeled Jack?
Is that what you call your son?
No, that's
You
a
should.
great little reference to Jack, though. But there was this like odd creature. I can't believe you've never heard of Spring-Heeled Jack. It's that maybe I'm gonna leave that too, because that's a very interesting little piece of lore, like Victorian, where like this strange creature would, harass a woman and then like be able to like leap over, a building to get away, and just really bizarre, presentation. Very interesting. Uh, the War of the Worlds radio presentation. That was like a mass hysteria, wasn't it? People believed that aliens were coming and they were
Oh,
selling their stuff and, all that. We talked about this one I bring up because we talked about the daycare sex abuse hysteria in the Satanic Panic episode. And whenever I can mention a past episode, I do.
Y2K.
Y2K, absolutely perfect example. People behaving wild because they think that even December 2012, the Mayan calendar.
12,
Another
12,
episode.
12.
12, 12, 12. Yeah.
My birthday.
So
Yep.
remember that Charlie Panic of 2015, that viral game that kids were afraid that there was like some kind of evil
Was
presence
that
from,
that thing where he looked like that creepy looking meme?
that might be a Momo.
Oh, that was a Momo. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then there was the clown sightings, which I don't know. I always saw that as like a mass hysteria, but I thought there really were clowns. Or
I
was I
thought
just
I thought that there were two, but maybe I
maybe
don't
we
know.
maybe we fell into the mass hysteria,
Maybe we did.
you know? So and actually, it is interesting because we do all sort of have this in us, and I can prove it to you in a sense. Like, have you ever heard someone say, "Hey, don't yawn.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
contagious," right? It like literally is. And smiling is contagious and laughing is contagious. Like, Dave, your smile is contagious.
I know.
You know what I mean? And
Totally.
it's so interesting that that happens on a small scale and it's completely fine. We can accept that. But this is the same thing, just on a larger scale.
Okay.
Does that make
Yeah.
it make sense a little bit
Yeah.
more?
So
Yeah.
like if you were in a group of people and you yawned and everybody yawned,
Yeah.
that'd be mass
That's
hysteria.
that is, and everyone's like, we're fine with this. But if all of a sudden everyone had Tourette's, or if everyone was like, had a rash or a seizure
Mhm.
or went blind. Blind, that's not hyperbole. That's happened.
But are
Um,
they actually blind or they just believe they can't see and it's that conversion disorder?
dude, what's the difference?
Right.
And
That's
that's
that's the hardest part. And I know
that
we're
is the hardest part
we're
because that's what makes it be like messed up because you're like, oh, well, now you know that.
yeah.
So it's like someone with conversion disorder, maybe they're blind, maybe they're like paralyzed or whatever. Maybe it's one of these girls from Leroy and they have like Tourette's now. And they go into the CAT scan and they do the blood test and everything like that. And they're like, actually, you don't have everyone, so you don't have anything, so cut the shit.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And it's like, well, I don't know, maybe in somewhere in my subconscious I still believe it, or I'm having a hard time like, changing my mind. I don't know, whatever it is, but it's like we were talking about before. The mass psychogenic. This word suggests that it's in your head. So it's in your head, you're not faking it, and it's contagious, which means you could put this in someone else's head. I just love that whole
Yeah.
idea
Yeah.
behind this. And it's a very I find that very interesting. And I also want to ask you, Dave, since it's Easter, is even how widespread is this? Is religions? So, like, there's tons of religions in the world. We don't subscribe to all of them. So is religion mass hysteria? Is that what we're suspected to believe, or we're supposed to believe in a sense, at least growing up Catholic, that we're right and the rest of the world is suffering from mass psychogenic illness?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is that right?
And
Isn't
if
that
you're
kind of what
if
we're
you're
saying?
if you're part of it, you feel like everybody else has it, but then everybody else feels like you have it. Right? Is that kind of what you're
Absolutely.
saying? Like from
Absolutely.
the outside, if you're not a subscriber to that religion, you're looking at the people in the religion like, oh, that's like this, and then the people in the religion are looking at people who don't ascribe to it as like, no, that's mass
So
hysteria.
maybe, Dave, oh my God. So maybe it's like a evolutionary adaptation of survival because it's like we have to have this mass hysteria to live to make it okay to live in the world we live in
Yeah,
or to be part of a group.
right.
That's the kind
And
of like the glue that holds us all together.
I was actually kind of thinking that as I was doing the research for social contagion and some of the examples they give, there's very much a part of this that reminded me of that stuff that you would talk about often when, especially when we first started the podcast, you would often talk about survival
Yeah.
and just, like that hypervigilance you needed to have. And there's a piece of that that's present here that I'll get into. And there's definitely like what you said, as far as that piece of it of trying to fit into society and
Yeah, absolutely. Like
find
one person
community.
could create a whole group
Yeah.
large enough to sustain itself and protect itself from like other groups. And it's like, how do we become more powerful as a group? How do we become safer as a group? Oh, we share the same delusion, or story or whatever. And then it's
And
just
what's interesting, and I feel like I've heard this at like work
mhm.
groups and things like that. Sometimes it's not necessarily the person who starts the behavior that everybody follows, but it's that second person that goes along with it. And then you notice everybody else starts to fall in line, right?
Yeah,
If
absolutely.
it's just
It's
one
wild.
person, they're an outlier. If someone else joins in, suddenly now it's a trend, right?
It's a movement.
It's a
Yeah.
movement. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's a good point.
It's
So
interesting, isn't it?
so you
It really
need
is.
you need more than one person for this to really actually like carry. And that's why, there's the difference between what we're the conversion disorder and mass hysteria.
And in the past episode, I won't tell the story again, but I did tell the story about my friend who's a doctor in Hawaii now. He's the reason why he's so successful is because he thought he did really well on the SATs, but he really didn't.
Yeah.
I told you that story before,
Yeah.
right? And so like that, that goes to show you the power of belief. Like whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. And this makes that true. Whether if you think you're blind, you might be blind. You know what's interesting though? Like it's even gotten to there like historically speaking, or in a paranormal sense, there's been, people have thought that like a paranormal entity or, a spirit was real hard enough that that became real. Now what's that? Like that's something that's
I'm
like,
I'm not gonna lie. I literally was having similar thoughts to that recently because I just happened to be like putting on some TV the other day and not really paying attention, but like it was on the Travel Channel, and as you know, now the Travel Channel is no longer the Travel Channel; it's just Ghost Hunter stuff all day long.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm watching it, and I'm like, for these people, some of them, it feels like they truly believe
Sure.
whatever is going on here. So no matter what the reality is, their reality is that I'm being haunted. And yeah, that's a powerful thing to just, you're
It's
existing in your
absolutely is.
own truth and your own reality. And, whether it's real or not real, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I think it's called a tulpa in like Nepalese, like like they can create an entity from thought,
Mm.
which is a wild thought.
Which happens in mental health diagnoses as well.
Sure does. It
So,
absolutely does.
yeah,
So Dave, what's it like like I guess we'll see if this is redundant or not, but let's talk a little bit about
social contagion.
social
Yeah.
contagion.
All right. And yeah, you're right. This could be totally redundant. I do know that I mean, my whole question as I'm doing the research is there a difference between mass hysteria and social contagion? I know that they're two different names, but they're very similar in some aspects. And then there's a few differences. So I'm going to do my best to describe this, and we can kind of make our judgment from there. So social contagion involves behavior, emotions, or conditions spreading spontaneously through a group or network. Very similar to mass hysteria so far, right? Um, Obvious examples of this are when panic and fear spreads quickly through a crowd of people, or like when a mob turns suddenly violent, or when a group begins to imitate the behavior displayed by an individual or a faction of the group.
Okay. So this is sort of like Woodstock 99 kind of behavior.
Yes, that's 100%. That's actually
Yeah.
one of the examples later, not Woodstock itself, but like that kind of behavior. Becomes it almost becomes like an unconscious effort, and the mentality just shifts for the people. So there's two forms of this. There's behavioral contagion, which involves like the spread of a behavior through a group, and it refers to the ability for a person to um, copy a certain behavior of others who are either in the vicinity or whom they've been exposed to. I think examples of that could be like fads.
Yeah.
So, I one of the examples I read, I can't take credit for coming up with this, but this is genius. The ice bucket challenge.
You
The
know,
ice
that's back in a sense.
is
That's
it?
like back with a vengeance.
I didn't know
And
that actually.
yeah, no, all the kids, my son and his friend groups, they're all dumping water on their heads, and I forget what it's
Is it
for.
still for ALS or no?
It's not for ALS anymore.
Okay. So that
Shifted
was a
gears.
big thing though. That was
Yes.
for ALS at the time. And it was huge. You were seeing celebrities do it. You were seeing
Mhm.
like everybody was doing their own challenges. I thought of like TikTok dances.
Oh yeah.
You got one person doing it, and the next thing you know, you're scrolling through your videos, and you see everybody's doing the same freaking. The Kendrick Lamar walk at the halftime show when he does the Drake diss
Yeah.
is like the best example of this.
I've done it in
So,
my yard.
oh
Tried
my
to anyway.
god,
I've tried to.
I
I
I
wanted to
did
see
it
if
for
I
like
could.
I did it for 2 seconds, and I
I know the
instantly
rhythm.
quit. Yeah. But and it didn't matter if people had rhythm. I watched old people, young people, all nationalities and cultures and
Yeah.
backgrounds. Everybody started to do it,
Yeah.
and
They're
it
like walking down
started.
the aisle for their wedding like that now.
Yeah, but the best example of what I said before about like it's not necessarily always the person who does it, but sometimes it's like as soon as it was done, I remember seeing like a couple of videos. And
Mhm.
then by the next day and the following day, literally it was flooded everywhere, just
Wonderful.
watching people do it. So I thought that was like a prime example. I think fashion trends could be on this. It has to start somewhere, right? And then suddenly
Like
it's just
snap bracelets from when we were young.
I was thinking about how like this generation today, like the younger generation, has brought back a lot of 90s styles, like the bigger jeans have come back, just a lot of different influences, but it starts somewhere. So those are all kind of like benign things, but then there's also like the negative stuff that it could be. And I was reminiscing on like Tumblr, which was
Yeah.
that social media blog app that people were pretty big on for a while, but then there was that whole issue with the self-harm that was being almost promoted on it,
Yeah,
and I
like
think that app got a really, or that blog site got a really bad rap after that.
yeah, no, because it's like you want to identify with something, and then it's like yes, self-harm and SSI. It's a real, a thing that happens, and it
Yeah,
happens, but it's not as widespread as it would. That made it more widespread than it should be. You know
yeah,
what I mean?
people were
Like take a
sharing
number, say there's like a
stuff
three
about it.
percent of the population, are self-injurious.
Yeah,
Now there's what, like, like 15-20% of teenagers or something, and it's like
yeah,
that is not that's wrong. And maybe the reason is because like we were talking about before, like the line sight of the things that people can see that can be socially infected from are it's like so vast that we're seeing too much.
Yeah.
Isn't that it?
Yeah.
We're seeing too
Well,
much.
it does when the more you see it, the more it becomes normalized and
Yeah.
then there's always that confusion whether something is a social norm or not. And
Mm.
I think that's kind of what happened there. It almost became a social norm for self-injury with like younger individuals, right?
Yes, Dave, I can't speak for you, but it's like when you were growing up, was that even something that was happening?
I never never heard about
I
people
had
doing
never heard
it.
about it either. Doesn't mean it wasn't happening
Right.
in
Just
some way,
wasn't
shape, or
something I
form.
was exposed to.
Either was I.
So the other type of contagion is emotional contagion. So there's behavioral and emotional.
Hmm.
Emotional involves spontaneous spread of emotions and related behaviors and can happen from one person to another or in a larger group. This can explain why some experiences may be heightened when you're with a group. For example, if you're seeing a comedy at the movie theater
Oh yeah.
with an audience, that it might feel like the movie's significantly funnier than if you were watching it alone at home or something. I had that experience with Anchorman.
You okay?
I watched it in the theater and with friends, and it was like opening night, and it was the funniest thing I'd ever seen in my life.
You should
Still
have watched
enjoy
it
it
with
at
other
home,
people.
but it like the level of enjoyment I had when I watched it with an audience and people were laughing and this like the energy was high was
Right.
one of the best experiences.
And what would you say to this? I've heard people with with psychedelic experiences, whether mushrooms or LSD, whatever. They see something, and if they're doing it with a group, the group will see it too.
Ooh,
And I wonder if that would
that's
if it
very
would
like influential, and
yeah,
you're able
like
to influence.
your maybe your analytic part of your mind is less engaged, so you're tapping into more of like a the what is it? The collective unconscious.
Yeah,
You know, maybe a better access to that, which is wild to think
sure,
about.
sure. So when the identification with the rest of the group is strong, the behaviors of the others will have a larger influence. So there's these two terms that I wasn't really super familiar with, so I had to do a little dive on these terms to kind of understand whether what they're describing here. So for behavioral contagion, high homophily, is that how you say it? I don't.
Yeah.
Had you ever heard of this term before?
No.
All right. So it's the concept in sociology describing the tendency of individuals to associate and bond with similar others. Kind of like that phrase, birds of a feather flock together. All right.
Yes.
So that can lead to both minority and majority groups overestimating their
Okay.
sizes, and vice versa. So if you're part of a group and you have a group of individuals who are similar, you might tend to think your group is a larger population than it actually is.
I wonder if that is happening with I think that is happening with certain groups and maybe even like in the trans population.
I think it's happening in honestly so many populations in today's society because they're able to connect on a wider scale, and it makes it feel like and also social media, again, social media plays such a large role in the way that our, I think algorithms play a big, do you know about
Oh,
algorithms?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the more you're looking at one thing, you tend to continue to see more things that follow in it. And it makes you feel like, wow, this is so popular. I mean, that Kendrick Lamar thing I just described, for all I know, nobody else saw it.
No one's there's like nine people that did it and they're just all in your friend group.
Yeah, just because
Yeah,
it was my algorithm for looking it up in the first place.
that's
So, but
interesting.
like I do think that definitely kind of changes our view of it. It makes us feel like it's a bigger thing than maybe it actually is. It's probably like a 1% population, but it feels like it's 50% after like being exposed to it. So this can cause people to falsely predict the frequency of their behavior in the real world, and since they estimate based on their personal networks. Um, when they overestimate the frequency of the behavior, they may think that they're following social norms and they're less willing to change. Like they think my behavior is correct, other
Yeah.
people's is wrong, right? Or my beliefs are correct, other people's beliefs are wrong. I guess could be another way to look at it. Um,
Does that sound like very political?
yes, yes. So if you were actually trying to encourage or facilitate social contagion, you would actually want these individuals to connect with different types of people and that would be heterophilic
Uh-huh. We
populations
think you
instead
know what you
of
mean.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So if I wanted to encourage
It's like
social
same versus
contagion,
different. Yeah.
yeah, I would want them to kind of be exposed to people outside of their
Yeah.
homolithic group, if that makes sense.
Right, right, right.
Um,
Birds of not a feather, different
it-
kinds of birds hanging out.
yeah, but they might have some similarities, but just different enough that
Which
they
makes
wouldn't
sense
be
to be a little more well-rounded. So are you in a sense saying, I guess in the way I'm understanding this, social contagion is like if you it does bring up to mind politics and it's like to stay off any either side, it's like both sides, because there's only two sides, are socially contaminated and unable to see the other point of view.
it's like both sides are that homolithic.
Yeah, it's not good to only stay with your
Yeah,
crowd.
you have to
You gotta
be
get out of your
have the
crowd.
right.
Yeah, okay.
All right. So, hysterical contagion is a type of behavioral contagion that occurs when a group shows signs of a physical problem or illness,
Hmm.
and when in reality there are psychological and social forces at work. So this sounded very much like
Yeah, we're
his
dipping back
mass
into
hysteria to me. So hysterical contagion is a strong form of social contagion, and the symptoms can include those associated with clinical hysteria,
which
uh,
doesn't exist.
which doesn't exist. Yes, and the example for this is called the June bug epidemic. So in 1962, and this sounded similar to like one we would hear from mass hysteria. In 1962, a mysterious disease broke out in a dressmaking department of a U.S. textile factory. The symptoms included numbness, nausea, dizziness, and vomiting. Word of a bug in the factory got out, and that it would bite its victims and cause them to develop the above symptoms, and that started to spread quickly. Soon, 62 employees developed the mysterious illness. Some were actually hospitalized, and the news media reported on the case. Um, so, while some researchers believed that the workers were bitten by the bug, anxiety was probably the cause of the symptoms, and there was
Mhm.
no evidence that there was ever a bug found that would cause these flu-like symptoms, nor did all the workers demonstrate bites. So the workers concluded that the environment was stressful. The plant had recently opened and it was busy, and organization was poor, and all that stuff. And most of the victims reported high levels of stress in their lives, and social forces seemed to be at work as well. So, of the 62 employees that reported symptoms, 59 worked on the first shift, 58 worked in the same area, and 50 of the 62 cases occurred in 2 consecutive days after the media supposedly
Yeah.
sensationalized the event. Most of the employees who became sick took time off to recuperate.
And like if people might be saying like, oh, anxiety can cause like physical
100%.
symptoms, even in terms of like a bug bite. It's like yes, 100%. I remember, that I told you a long time ago, like got bit by a snake in the grass, and like I was walking through the grass maybe like a few years ago, and just the touch of the grass made me feel a pain of the bite,
Ooh,
which is wild,
yeah.
right? So it's like that your brain is like, hey, telling you, hey, look out. There's there's biting things in here. You know what I mean?
And I
Which
don't
is
know if
it's crazy
this,
that your brain could do that.
yeah, I don't know if this is kind of similar as well, but like when I was in college, like first year undergrad, I was super overwhelmed with schoolwork and the pressure of passing and failing to the point where I actually got like a physical uh, reaction on my body. I had like these bumps that were breaking out that I was like, what the hell? I thought I caught something in the public restroom or something like that. I had like a shared shower in my hallway. I was like, oh my God, did I catch something? But I went to the dermatologist and it was stress related. It was weird.
I mean,
I don't have it
it's
anymore, just
to
in case
me
you're wondering.
that's crazy. Like I almost like the sensations and even the paralysis and stuff like that I get. But physical representations like in terms of rashes and like bumps on your skin from a thought in a
Yeah,
sense
right.
is crazy.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so I mean, wow. Your
Yeah.
thoughts and your physiology are really, really, really we know that. We know that. Your thoughts and your physiology and your behavior are like the components of anxiety. That's what
Right.
they are. Like we need all those things. So it's just when you see it at its in its most extreme
Oh yeah,
senses,
it's wild.
it's wild. Yeah.
So there's a few types of behavioral contagion. I'll just go through these really quick. So behavioral contagion, it can be split into six subcategories. We have hysterical contagions, which I just talked about, and Junebug was like the example for that. Deliberate self-harm contagions, so like trends in of suicide, eating disorders, other things like that. Like I was saying with that Tumblr thing, I think. Contagions of aggression. So that's kind of what you were talking about, Greg. The
Mhm.
riots, looting, Woodstock 99, just
April
situation
1992,
April 1992,
after the
Baltimore.
Rodney King.
Oh, okay.
Yep,
It was
the
the
riots,
Baltimore
the LA
riots,
riots.
LA riots. Yeah, like anything like that, I think. Or just like small things happen and all of a sudden everybody's looting. Like, just people, it seems almost like it's opportunistic, but it's almost like
Yeah.
everybody's just kind of,
Like someone like I always understood like I never understood that where someone's team would win some like a championship and then they would like riot in the streets. It's
yeah,
like what?
yeah,
Like why?
right.
Okay.
um, Rule violation contagions. So a wave of steroids in sports. Remember,
Okay.
like Mark McGuire, Sammy
Yeah. Sammy
Sosa,
Sosa. Yep.
yep, Barry Bonds.
Barry Bonds. Yeah. Barry Bonds went from being my size
Oh
to a
God.
monster.
He also, I mean, all three of them went from being heroes in the sports world to losers.
I
And
know.
it's sad
And it was
that they
crazy
did
because
that.
Bonds was incredible. And like we almost had our own social contagion when we were like, maybe he's not. And clearly he was.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, yeah. Also, like, think about when you're driving on the highway and, like how you go with the speed of the traffic at times, and sometimes you're all just speeding, things
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah,
It's
like
almost
if
like you don't
everyone
have
else
your
is
own
doing it.
individual thought. You're just
I
all
know.
going at the same rate, and you don't even kind of like put thought into that.
That's that evolution piece. That's
Mhm.
that like adaptation thing.
Yep.
We just kind of fall in line. Crazy.
Um, Consumer behavior contagions. This one I didn't really think about, but buying crazes.
Hmm.
I'll never forget. My mom always tells me about the Cabbage Patch Kids craze,
Yep.
or like every
Tickle me
Christmas there's
Elmo.
Tickle Me Elmo. There's always a new thing with video game systems at times, or toilet paper during COVID
Hmm.
when that became a
Yeah.
big thing. Just
And
certain things
so
like that.
people buying like vats of it.
Yeah, yeah, it was wild, and there was no
Yeah.
real reason for it. um, Financial contagions like the Great Depression
Mm.
or recessions, things like that.
Dave, that's so interesting that you say that because you know, lately we've been talking about, or not like in the news, there's talk of possible financial, you know, problems ahead, whatever. I don't know, whether you believe that or not. It doesn't matter to me. But I mean, it's interesting because it's like the stock market is this thing that honestly, I'm not even involved in at all. And it's like this, these numbers on the screen are going to decide whether or not there's going to be jobs. I'm kind of like blown away by the whole thing. Like, why don't we just, if we just shut that whole thing off and didn't look at it, what would happen?
I don't know.
Right?
I
It's
don't
like
know.
ultimately it's numbers.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to feel that way even about my own bank account. It's just like, oh, these are just numbers on my phone. Like, what if, like it can all like disappear pretty
You
quickly.
had that happen.
I
So,
did. I did. Don't go to New Hampshire, folks. I'll wipe you clean.
back to another thought that you had earlier. So you brought up priests,
Yeah,
and
I did.
I'm assuming you were referring to like the whole
I
like,
was. Yeah.
yeah, sexual
Yeah.
abuse thing. Doesn't that almost feel also like a social contagion, a behavioral contagion?
Oh yeah.
Just this wave of like all these individuals engaging. Like, what's the odds that all those individuals are all into the same stuff?
Well, I mean, because I think the odds are, and the way I've always thought about it is like this, and obviously they're not speaking for all people. I actually have a priest in my family who's a very
Yeah,
good
no
person.
shade to the good ones.
No shame to the good ones. Just like cops and teachers and Boy Scout leaders or whoever
Right,
else.
right.
Right. It's like no shame to the good ones. But it's like I think there's like a repressive nature inherent in like, hey, look, you can't be so say it's like a homosexual kid in like the 60s, that you can't be that. So you can say, you know what? I don't even have to address this sexuality thing. I can just go be a priest and never have to worry about sexuality at all.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's not how it works, right? And then it's like you can't really it's like you could kind of see how it would happen. It's just such a bad setup for like You just have to be in it for the right reasons, obviously.
As far as
Yeah.
like the contagion piece though goes, it almost feels like I would assume one individual engaged and
Yeah.
then another one became aware and
Yep.
maybe they engaged
And
or
then
so,
people,
or they
from
like
there it was,
and
ugh,
then it became like a big thing because like what's the odds that all these cases were happening and they weren't aware of each other, right? There's not
right.
the odds of that are slim, I would assume.
So in terms of, yeah, I know at all. But if you're interested in that in the social contagion piece, because I think you're right. If you've ever seen that movie Spotlight,
Yeah.
it's great. And so is a movie Doubt,
Yes,
which is
I
really
loved
good.
out too. Yeah,
Yeah,
that was a
both
great
two
movie.
great movies, kind of addressing that.
And
Uh,
couldn't you also say that for almost any role that has like a high propensity for that kind of stuff, like a Boy Scout leader?
mhm.
I mean, I'm sure those roles are kind of put you in places, so I guess it's a little opportunistic.
It's like a
But
power dynamic too, though.
yeah, I guess yeah. I don't know. I think there could be a case to be made for does this also play into some of that stuff as well?
Absolutely. It's definitely a piece of it.
Yeah. So there's definitely some interesting stuff to consider with all this. Why does any of this matter? I think that this could have a positive impact in shaping some behaviors, such as ways to assist with like rehabilitation of criminals and drug addicts, and like as something that can encourage the adoption of just good behavior, right? Good
Sure.
societal behavior. Like I think
Like
if
who
you
you're
can,
spending your time, like what you're spending t your time around.
yeah,
Like maybe you adapt on some, like who do you admire, be around that kind of stuff.
sure.
Sure.
Yeah, like if we can figure out a way to promote more positive behavior or ways to get people who have engaged in other stuff or tend to engage in other stuff to engage in better stuff. I mean, that's good. I almost feel like there's like a business model to social contagion in some aspects. We've kind of figured it out with social media. We just don't know how to make it for good, I guess, in a way. It's like they're onto something with how they use social media. Um,
I know they're like it's like they know and they're preying on that.
I know, and that's the thing that's scary. So it's like is it could be used for good if they were able to use it, but like just like with anything, I guess, in the world
Money.
and society, yeah, it goes what actually makes money, what puts money in people's pockets, and yeah, we just people don't care enough. Sometimes it
I
feels
know
like to
it's
actually
scary.
just
It's
help the
scary,
greater good.
scary, scary. It really is. It's like actually terrifying. And to me, it's like one lesson we can take from this too is, look, this is something we're all sort of prone to. We're all susceptible to this behavior, and it's almost in our DNA to kind of follow, right? And get wrapped up in it. And that's why we love leaders and heroes so much.
Sure.
But
I just said prison and I just thought about it. I bet like when if there's like a riot in prison,
yeah,
the likelihood of people jumping into that and participating in that would probably be really high because it's all individuals with like similar,
impulsivity, risk takers,
yeah,
yeah, for whatever reason they've developed.
or
Yeah.
they're just identifying each other as like kind of even if they see each other as different like demographic wise, they're in this shared experience, so there's a connectedness that they all have, so it probably makes it
Yeah.
really easy for these
Oh, that's
them
true.
to have giant prison outbreaks, right?
Absolutely. And like it's not just so we're all ultimately in some kind of group, right?
Yeah.
That's just kind of like how it works. Whether that's like our profession or whatever, like we're in groups. Just beware and like monitor yourself and make sure you're not just doing things because that's what everyone else is doing. Make sure you're doing things. That's why it's so important to identify your values. And I think that's, you know what I mean? We fall into
Mhm.
these little behaviors and we don't even notice it. So
Yeah.
I think it's an important thing to like identify as you go about your life. Like why am I doing the things am I doing? Am I doing it because I'm seeing it or am I doing it because I'm choosing to do it?
Yeah.
So
uh,
social.
yeah, social contagion. And I guess one of the things I wanted just to add is like one of the things that I've heard was a critique of it is, or seems like an issue, is lack of its like firm definition,
Yeah.
and it can be described differently by different sources, which is interesting. It, but the other thing I feel like is this feels way too complex for a thing that doesn't need to be so complex, like breaking it down into all these different sub things and all that stuff. It's just it to me, there's like probably easier ways to describe what's happening here. But yeah, I don't know. So is mass hysteria and social contagion the same? Are they different? Where do we land? Greg,
I think they're
what's your,
different. I think
yeah,
they're different. I think one affects, it seems like it affects your behavior, but you're in on it in a sense. You know,
yeah.
like this, and in one, it's like you're driven. That's why they connected it. That's probably why they connected it to possession because it's like you're not in on it. It's like you're being driven towards it, and you don't
So
know why.
which one is that, would you say?
That's the mass hysteria or the psychogenic illness. Like
Okay.
it's against your will, and the other
Yeah.
one is like you're in on it, whether you're in on it for the right reasons or not, or whether yeah, or if you're just fooled to being in on it for those
At
reasons,
least from the
be part of
definitions
something. Yeah.
that we were given here, I think that's a good conclusion, depending on what definition, I guess. So the other thing I forgot to mention earlier, let me just really quickly bring this up. Um, Another example that was often given was like suddenly there's like a an alarm is pulled and everybody flees, or like you're in a movie theater and there's like a noise and everybody runs out of the movie theater and you don't really even know why. You just run.
Yeah.
That's a behavioral or that fear, right? That's like there's
Yeah. Yeah.
emotion tied in. Um, that's what I was saying, like that survival piece right there. You just go into like so obviously there is some stuff with your brain that's happening, like your amygdala's
You
firing
follow the
off.
crowd. Like even beyond that, Dave, like if there's no alarm, like if you're like I remember being a kid, I've told this story before where like a bunch of us would be going to check out a haunted house and one kid hears something and runs. You don't fucking
Everybody
be like,
runs.
you all
Everybody
run.
runs.
You all
Yeah.
run. You don't need to be signaled, you don't need to be told. You're following the group. And it's almost like when you were talking about the movie theater, it's almost like Pavlovian. We don't see a fire, we don't see an accident, we don't see anything dangerous. We hear a noise and we go.
Yes.
So we're
Yeah.
conditioned too, which is scary. We're very conditional people. Like we could be conditioned pretty fucking easy, which is scary as shit.
And we're conditioned with things that sound like horrible situations that we would
Uh-huh.
not want. So the movie theater thing, as soon as I heard that example, I automatically think of like years and years ago when we had like that shooter that went into a movie theater, and I think it was like when
Batman's.
Batman came out,
Yeah.
right? Yep, with the Heath Ledger one. And yeah, that was really scary. So now I think that's always a thought in people's minds, and I'm sure that we've actually kind of passed that. That generational trauma has passed that down to younger people who probably weren't even aware of that at the time it happened or anything like that. And I think it's instinctive now. But yeah, there's this. So that's a part of this as well, and that's another interesting part. And that definitely, like I said, is linked to brain functioning and survival, and just
Mhm.
how we're kind of always geared for that. Like I'm gonna just run because I'm not gonna question that takes time. And who has time, right?
Who has time? Who's got the
So yeah,
time? Dave, I had fun with this one with you. I really did. It felt good. Um, interesting stuff. Us human
yes,
beings, aren't we?
yes, we
It's
are
almost like the
fascinating.
more you like dive into the human condition, the scarier it
Yeah,
gets.
yeah, it can be a very strange and confusing place,
Yeah,
but
ignorance is bliss. That's true.
for sure.
But don't
Um,
worry about it. We'll forget it all by next week.
I was gonna say ignorance is bliss, but not here because we try our best to
Yeah.
not be ignorant to anything.
And we tried our best not to be ignorant, and I wish that was true about like forgetting things. We talked about the review we got today. But Dave, we did get a good one.
We did. We did. I'm pulling it up right now.
Okay.
So last week we went on a little tirade as we read our negative review. And yeah, I don't know. I left that feeling like, oh, maybe we shouldn't have done that. Maybe that was immature of us.
Yeah.
But we had our feelings and we expressed them. And I don't think we said anything wrong. But what we will say is we got an awesome one that was like a rebuttal to that negative one about the ACT episode. So uh Kiana HL
Love you.
or Kiana with an H at the end, L. I don't know. But thank you. Gave 5 stars. Act episode was great. Smiley face. The act episode was great. It was the first episode I listened to of you guys, and I've been binge listening since. Thank you. I am in grad school and found that episode because I'm doing ACT small groups at high school. The coins in hand analogy was so great, and I shared it with my class.
You know that's a Greg Charpentier original. That's not in any book.
That is
So
amazing, Greg. That is amazing. See, that felt good.
Yeah, because we worked hard on that one. Anyways,
Yeah, that was a nice review, and we appreciate it. And yeah, if you haven't written a review, give it a shot. It's a
yeah,
lot of
give it a shot.
fun.
It's so fun
It is a
and so
lot of
appreciated
fun.
and
Yeah.
definitely read. And it's not like one of these podcasts where you write a review and we're never gonna get to it. Trust me, we're gonna see it. And it means a lot.
And we chat about it and discuss it and stuff like that. So, yeah. And if you're not already a subscriber on our Patreon, please consider doing so because at some point we are starting to pull our episodes off of the platforms. We have so many episodes and we're going to start putting them just on Patreon for Patreon access or to Apple Subscribe access. So right now we're kind of looking at our back catalog and figuring out what's going to go where and what we're going to continue to keep public if we feel like it has benefit to like grad school students and stuff like
Yeah,
that
if it has
who
benefit to people and like the episodes that we've heard that have helped people with their own mental health or with others, like, and they've been useful, they'll be always there, always
yeah
free, always
yeah
whatever.
but at some
Yeah.
point we had to like pull some because there's so freaking many of
But
them
if you want to
and
hear some cool ghost stories or a Halloween, you know what I
yeah
mean?
get
Like,
over on Patreon or
yeah,
Apple
yeah.
Subscribe. So yeah, thank you everybody. I hope you have a great week. We'll be back next week with another episode and we'll see you then. Thanks and have a good night. See ya.
See ya.